Antoinette, and welcome. Good afternoon, everyone, to this briefing for the engineering sector. So my name is Gabriel Staples. I'm the product manager for engineering, construction, building services. Also joined by Everin Alibaba, who's the subject advisor for engineering, construction, and design. He will monitor the chat. If you've got any queries whilst we're going, you just please put in the chat. And if you want to come off mic at the end of the presentation, we can have a Q&A session at the end if there's anything unresolved. So I've just got probably about 30 minutes of slides or so to go through. The purpose is to bring you up to speed with the changes, the reform changes and the announcements just made last month by the Labour government, and also to talk about the offer for 25, 26 and 27 as such as we know it for this sector. So this is the agenda then. So excuse me, we'll talk about the backgrounds of the review. We'll look at the qualifications that are impacted for Pearson BTEC, look at curriculum planning for the new qualifications, the reform qualification that's coming out for September. Talk a little bit about the resources and support. We will mention level 2 funding reform, which has partially happened, but broadly been sort of paused. And we'll go through other sources of supports and have a Q&A session at the end. So the context of this reform, then, this really goes back several years. This is a process that's been going on for some time. There was a level 3 and below policy announcement back in 2021, where in broad terms, the principle was to have the A levels and T levels or apprenticeships as the main routes. They did then allow the possibility to have an A-level size vocational qualification called AAQ, so that's alternative academic qualification, to sit alongside that. But in the main, where a subject was a T-level subject area, such as construction or engineering manufacturing, there would be no more big BTECs or big vocational qualifications alongside. You'd have to do the T-level if you wanted a full-size specialist vocational qualification. That was the decision back then. Then they developed published criteria to develop under these new reformed qualifications, the new alternative academic A-level size qualifications, which we have done, and confirmed the funding last year for those, and started to reform level 2 as well, which we'd done gone through one cycle to submit new level 2 post-16 qualifications as well. We're not talking about the 14 to 16, it's the post-16 level 2 that they were also reforming at the same time. And broadly, these were to align to routes into employment, to align to apprenticeships. And then last year with the election, they announced an immediate pause to that process to quickly sense check what was going on. Broadly, in the main, it's positive. They did listen to centres' concerns about things being certain learner types and certain specialisms being not catered for if you've got a T-level only approach or an A-level approach. And this rapid review that concluded just a few weeks ago, just before Christmas, had an impact on engineering, which we'll go on to talk about in a second. And I should also say there were some funding decisions that were going to stop funding from last July, but they actually last September they actually got reversed as well. But that didn't really affect engineering; it's more construction. So the rapid review was this: the new government coming in, and it was this quick review of the previous decisions for the Cycle 1 sectors, things like health and social care, construction, engineering, computing, digital. Those sectors, they were just checking to see what, getting some feedback from stakeholders and colleges, and in the main, they did listen to the concerns, and so they made some decisions specific to each sector, and I'll outline those for engineering now. So the outcomes for engineering, the first stage of this was to essentially get rid of some of the lower volume qualifications. So they still want to reduce the proliferation of qualifications. So they gave us a list of a few qualifications, for example, those listed at the end of the slide here, that had low or no funded full-time learner registrations on. And those were a couple of BTEC national specialist pathways, so electrical, electronic, and mechanical, And there was the smaller size of the AME, the Advanced Manufacturing Engineering, which is primarily an apprenticeship qualification, but is also used for some full-time learners, particularly pre-apprenticeship. We tried to appeal that, and they rejected that appeal. So they are defunding from 2025, from September 25, due to low and no registrations. And I think that process then allows them to show government that they've gone through, or show the ministers that they've gone through a process to reduce some of the ineffective or less popular qualifications. And then that allows them to then make a decision about the sector more broadly. And that really the key outcome was that this second line here, the BTEC nationals remain that were going to be defunded. Sorry, the 360 and 180 GLH qualifications will be defunded, but replaced by the new AAQ, which I'll talk about. So there's still a provision for an A-level size vocational qualification in engineering, and that the qualifications, the larger qualifications, can still be funded for engineering, which we'll see that in the list. You'll see how it affects the provision. They can still be funded for 26 and 27. That gives them time to do this whole curriculum and assessment review, which looks at everything, general qualifications and GCSEs, A levels, and vocational, and looks at all subject areas. So they will make some conclusions on that this year, which will determine what we have to do from 2027. So at the moment, there broadly is still an engineering vocational offer for all sizes, with a couple of little exceptions, which I'll talk about. So the funding list, the impact of this policy on the funding list is essentially, you'll see for the current year on the left, 24-25, what you'll be interested in 25-26, everything was going to be defunded, apart from the new one. And then 26-27. So we've essentially just, the only bits where we've been defunded is where there's either a replacement alternative academic qualification of that size. So the extended certificate, that's the new one there, in bold. And where there is defunding in these couple of areas where the pathways, and there was very low uptake. So we unfortunately couldn't make that argument to keep offering that. Those qualifications. And I should say this only affects England. This is this does not affect Wales or Northern Ireland. So you can still continue to deliver BTEC nationals in all these sizes that are showing up as green here, and the advanced manufacturing engineering, of course, qualifications for 26 this year, 26 and 27. So a couple of slides on curriculum planning particularly for the new qualification, and also for the other qualifications. Essentially, obviously you've got from September, you will have an alternative academic qualification with a different set of units and different exams compared to the legacy BTECs, the 540, 720, 1080 that's still available. You can't, unfortunately, mix and match in the way that you could have done before, so topping up and dropping down, because the learners, the learning, you could probably APL the learning, but you can't. It's a different unit, different registration, and different assessment that you have to take for those. So if you were planning to do, you had registered this year, or you were looking at dropping down perhaps next year onto a smaller qualification like 360, then you can't do that. If you register next year for the new one, the new alternative academic qualification, the extended certificate, with the intention of then topping up, then you can't do that in that way, because the units do not count towards the bigger size, and vice versa. You can't fall back from the legacy BTEC national, the larger size. You can't fall back onto the new qualification because of the different content and assessment. The study programs, one extra bit of good news is the study programs requirements have been scrapped. So you used to be, the rule was that you had to do 2 A levels alongside 1 AAQ. There were some exceptions to that, but they're always very vague. But we do still recommend A levels to go alongside as one model, because that's how we design the qualification to complement STEM subjects. But it's no longer necessary to do that. There are other vocational qualifications you could combine them with. So we've got examples here that are still relevant from our original study programs and some other examples that are a bit more flexible, a bit more vocational in approach. I'll show them on the slide now for a second. So when we consulted with higher education to get this approved and get the evidence together for DFE, we got the feedback that, you know, the relevant combinations that you could have with A levels that they would accept. It's worth noting that they may still accept the new vocational qualification with some other VQs or AAQs, but you would need to check with that institution because some universities don't allow three A-level equivalents of vocational. Some of them mandate you have to do maths, for example, or you have to do physics or something like that. So it really will depend on where the learner wants to go. But essentially, they've given the same recognition to this new qualification as they had with the old BTEC. We anticipate that the larger BTECs would still be recognised just as they always have been. Nothing's changed on that in that regard. So some guidance here about transferring learners, and this does relate to the topping up and dropping down. So really, if the last funding date is before your certification, intended certification date, you would only have been able to transfer learners, but essentially the top-ups, as I've said, the top-ups is not really going to work it's not going to work in the same way that it always has done for the new qualification and the old with the dropping up and dropping down and topping up. You would have to have registered if you're going to top up from a qualification and the funding is going to be eventually it will go for 2027. You'd have to make sure if that is in its last year of funding, you'd have to make sure that the top up, i.e. you'd actually register on the bigger size qualification before the end of the summer, so you can start doing some teaching on that qualification before rather than waiting for the September to then decide whether to top up or not, because that would then be you'd then be registering in a defunded year, if that makes sense. So it's just things to be aware of when when qualifications are at their end of their funded life and they're about to be defunded. You will not be able to rely on the top up process as you had done before if you've done that. So this is a comparison between the current qualification, the extended certificate, A-level size qualification, and the new one from September. It's a simpler structure. It does have external examinations plus internal assessments. There are a number of key differences, which we'll talk about in the next slides. But essentially what we've done is keep a lot of the content, but in a sort of reformatted. So the things in design, in project management, and understanding manufacturing processes, that content is all included in the new qualification. It's not something we've got rid of. We've updated where we can, following advice from industry and from higher education, to make sure the content's up to date. But essentially, they're still doing maths and science exam. They're still doing getting hands-on with a design, responding to a brief to do a design, and they are carrying out project management processes for a thing that they have to a project that they have to see to completion. That doesn't necessarily need to be, by the way, it doesn't need to be a physical thing they have to make. It could be the sort of visualization, but it's left fairly broad. And the one of the key differences for this new qualification, there's not authorized briefs as such, but there are set assignments that we produce each year that you'll then have to give to your learners, and we typically will vary the theme for the project. For example, it might be wearable technology one year or sustainability, but these themes will then with some ideas that you can choose within that theme, so that every cohort gets a similar sort of experience. But there is still some scope for learners to do something that they're interested in or an area that you're particularly a specialist in your centre, for example. So here's a summary of the changes and some of the similarities. It's still a vocational approach, despite it being called an alternative academic qualification. That was the last government's naming nomenclature for it, but it's a vocational qualification for those who they want to do engineering or have an interest in engineering alongside other A-level or BTEC study. So it's as that size of qualification can be mix and match with A-levels. Obviously, very useful to be used, as it always was, for progression to HE, but not exclusively. You could go into work. We kept the established grade profiles, pass, merit, distinction. We still got the maths and science in the engineering principles unit. And we've kept the design and manufacturing processes, the project management. We've introduced something for specifically for engineering applications, so to understand how these things work in industry. And we got some more modern content in there as well. And we've kept the most relevant optional content like the CAD units, the project units, and so on in the new structure. Throughout the qualifications, opportunities to apply engineering communication skills to solve problems and understand modern engineering industrial processes and how these apply to practical projects. And we have a link here if you get sent the slide deck afterwards, which we will do, then you can click on the link in there for the transition guide in more detail. So in terms of word on our resources and support, this is the schedule for what we're doing and when. So we've got various training sessions, getting ready to teach and getting ready for internal assessment. These will be live events, excuse me, and they will also be on demand. And these will be available from this term. Some videos will be produced as well. But these are generic videos, I think, for applicable to all new AAQs. And then in the summer term, we got more detailed getting ready to teach, transitioning workshops, and some deep dives on some delivery of particular units. And we'll cover getting ready for external assessment as well. And these can all be found through the training from Pearson, the part of our website that deals with training. Support. So we've always delivered sort of offered consistent support for BTEC Nationals that's similar across the different subject titles, and we will be doing the same for these new qualifications. So we've got a dedicated web page for delivering BTECs, quite generally, which is obviously very useful if you're new to BTEC. We've got teaching and learning support. We've got some of that is free, some of that is paid for, which I'll talk about in a second. You've got a service where you can access the scripts once you've gone through a series of assessments to see how the learners have done in detail. Exam Wizard is available for free, and that's an online resource with a bank of past paper questions, which will obviously grow over time with the qualification. Results Plus is an analysis that's again post the first assessment window. You'll be able to use that to see how your students have done, where they can improve or where they've been really successful. And of course, access to subject advisor Everin and myself, happy to speak to you, and I'll put contact details at the end of the slide deck. So the comprehensive package of paid for resources, we've got textbooks and teacher packs. There will be samples available soon, hopefully within the next few weeks, and planned final publication date of April. And these will be available from our Pearson Schools and College website. So this is a summary then across the new AAQs that we are launching for September, just to show that engineering has all three available. Sorry, this slide hasn't been properly completed, but essentially, it's, as I said, it's there are some planning and delivery guides that are available, and these I think will be for the spring. And these are basically like schemes of work that I've seen some of the early drafts. They're still being written, those, but they should be available for the spring. Other than that, it will be April for other stuff, with the events ongoing. and that's the link to where the support materials will be held. So I'm just going to talk briefly about level 2 now, because that was impacted by the recent announcement. There was a big program of level 2 reform that was rather complex, that for post-16 people who still needed the level 2 weren't yet ready for level 3, or knew that they wanted to align to a particular apprenticeship but weren't quite ready for it. These are quite technical qualifications, hands-on. There was a very complex proposal from the last government to make 7 or 8 different categories of qualification. We've gone through one round of that for engineering. We've developed one and got it approved. That's fine, but they have essentially paused any further reform, and this will be pending the outcome of the curriculum and assessment review, with the full conclusions of that review by this autumn. So there'll be no defunding effectively for BTEC qualifications, things like the engineering operations or the BTEC first or the manufacturing qualification. We've got a couple of BTEC specialists that are used. There will be no defunding of that. That will still be maintained until 2027. This was the schedule before that was shown on screen. So for 2025, we did get one cycle through this new reform before they paused it all before the election, and that was the lean manufacturing operatives qualification. Essentially, that's closely aligned to the lean manufacturing operatives apprenticeship, with the comprehensive program of knowledge and skills, with tasks that you can do in a workshop environment, and you don't have to generate workplace evidence. So it helps learners develop some skills, some behaviours, communication, and safe working practices aligned to that apprenticeship standard. I think it is endorsed by employers for entry into that. They still need to do training on program, still need to do the qualifications on program if there's one mandated in the apprenticeship. But employers said to us that they were happy that this would prepare them for not just lean manufacturing, but a range of engineering operative roles. Much far better to have this than to simply have 1 or 2 GCSEs, for example. So it's been endorsed. Excuse me, going forward, it's been endorsed by a number of employers, large and some SME as well. Other qualifications. So everything else is paused, and we've not got any. We've not heard when it's going to reopen for any further qualifications. So therefore, just to be safe, they have kept available the funding for legacy qualifications like the BTEC first, for example, that are used post-16, the larger sizes, and other things like the BTEC level 2 certificate diploma in engineering operations. Just a couple of useful links. When you get the slide deck, you'll be able to see this is links to our own guidance, our FAQs, and the DFE guidance, with detailed lists across all awarding bodies of what's being funded and what isn't. So next steps really is just summary of what I've just said. DFE have paused cycle 2 submissions for level 2, level 3. So that means the first stuff we got through, like the engineering operatives, lean manufacturing operatives, and the AAQ, that's funded. Any other reform has been paused. Therefore, the defunding process has stopped as well, which is good news. So you can still do the larger size of the BTEC National and all other post-16 BTECs that you may have been doing as well. There will be some submission later. We don't really know, but we anticipate that it will be 2027 before, pending the outcome of the CAR. It'll be 2027 before any new qualifications will be available for first teach, unless they change policy and do some surprise announcements. But so for all other sectors, and this includes engineering, that statement at the end there, qualifications that need to be retained long term will be reformed and informed by the curriculum and assessment review. We expect to find out more later in the year.